Hi, Kathleen Guire here. Welcome to Trauma Informed Parenting. I've been doing a series on a free PDF called How to Have Peace When Your Kids Are in Chaos that you can get on my website, traumainformedparenting.com. And today we are going to talk about applying the science. So we started with what I thought worked when it came to raising kiddos with trauma histories. And just to fill you in a little bit, I'm an adoptive mom of 4 and a mother of 7 altogether. And when my kiddos came home to me, in air quotes, and their behaviors were coming out, they were dysregulated because of their early life trauma. And I thought that the way to address that was to learn the science, what the science said, apply that science, and then their behavior would just change and it would just be magically peaceful. And that did not work. And so what I learned through the process of lots of error was that the biggest part of the chaos was me. So I'll back up just for a minute. I have a trauma history as well. And that's what gave me a heart to adopt children and to learn how to be a trauma-informed parenting coach. But I was just assuming that because I had experienced trauma, that it equipped me to parent kiddos who had a trauma history. And it didn't work because I had triggers, they had triggers, their triggers were triggering my triggers, and my triggers were triggering their triggers, and it was just a trigger war. So what I first thought worked was, like I said, learn the science, apply the science, the behaviors changed. And what I learned worked is reframe our beliefs, whether it's our parenting beliefs or beliefs about ourselves. We have to reframe those beliefs or myths that we've believed about adoption and foster care. And then we have to make sense of and peace with our past, which obviously doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen if you miss that video and you go back and watch it. I really recommend you do, but it won't be after that video you're like, oh, I'm done, I did it, I watched the video. It's an ongoing process, but we do have to do that. And then we learn the science, which we talked about in the last video. And then we apply the science, and then we will find more peace. I didn't say perfect peace. I said we will find more peace. Now, one of the ways that we apply the science is we leave traditional parenting behind and we parent in a different way than maybe we were parented. So I'm going to actually read to you what I call instead of tips, which I have a whole workbook on. So the instead of tips are what you use instead of traditional parenting. And these are in the free PDF, just the list of them. Instead of a lecture, use simple language, about 8 to 12 words total. Because what happens with a kiddo's brain is when we are lecturing them, you know, the old Charlie Brown where you heard the teacher and it was wah, 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 wah. That's what kiddos hear. And you want them to respond, and sometimes you need to use like a word to draw them in. It could just be their name. You could just say, you know, John, 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 and don't say anything else until you have their attention, but then use as few words as possible. All right? Instead of waiting for behaviors to intensify, respond quickly. You know, you can't be a couch potato parent. It just doesn't work. When you're sitting there saying, didn't I tell you to stop? Didn't I tell you to stop? And it may mean that you get up, that you walk over to the child and you get down on their level and say, okay, and let's figure out what's going on here. And then go to the first suggestion. Use as few words as possible. Instead of giving orders, offer simple choices. Honestly, this is a life skill. And it's one that I didn't understand when I first started parenting. And it was my oldest daughter who really taught me how to give choices. Because I just thought, you know, this needs to be done. This is the way it needs to be done. Let's get it done. and she wanted choices, which is a good thing, because when your kiddos get out into the world, you know what they're going to have to do? They're going to have to make choices. And if you prime the pumps, so to speak, so that they're ready to make choices. And when I say offer simple choices, it's nothing huge. It can be, do you want to wear the purple pants today or the pink ones? Do you want to have this kind of cereal or that kind of cereal? Do you want to take a bath or a shower? It's a powerful tool in parenting. It makes the child feel like they have some control and as if they have a value, that you value what they're saying. And like I said, bonus, huge bonus, it gives them practice for when they get out into the world and they have to make huge decisions, larger decisions than whether they're going to eat Cheerios or Fruity Pebbles or whatever you give them choices for. Instead of just correcting, give immediate retraining and a redo. So instead of just saying, you know what, you need to share, you need to apologize, walk them through that. Give them a redo. Let's try that again. Let's say that with nicer words. And if they don't have any words, give them some words. Give them a script. Let them repeat after you. That's okay. Instead of expecting a child to know, clarify expectations. This is a huge one. Think about the last job that you went in and they didn't do any training. And you're just like, I have no idea what to do. But you were expected to do a certain thing, do a certain task, or follow a certain agenda. And kiddos need to know what's going on, what you expect. In fact, my daughter and her husband have this phrase that they use now that's just, what's the expectation? And it's not a mean question. It's just, do you know what the expectation is? Do you know what's going on? And if they don't, it's okay. Clarify. Tell them what's going on. Instead of isolating a child when he is dysregulated, keep the child near you. Now, I know a really popular parenting technique is time out. Well, with kiddos who have experienced trauma or can't regulate, they have a capital letter syndrome and they're just totally dysregulated, putting them alone in a room is going to make it worse. And when I say keep them close next to you, if they're kicking and screaming, obviously you don't want them on your lap, but you want to co-regulate for them by being near them. Instead of only noticing bad behaviors, offer praise for success. Now, this is one I really had to work on because I felt I was stuck in this rut of correcting. So I started just trying to find things that my kiddos were doing, like, hey, that's a great Lego thing that you just built. Or great job sharing today. Or I love that Play-Doh thing that you just created. So find ways. We all want to be valued and loved, and we all want to know that we're doing something right, And when we're only noticing the bad behaviors, what our kids hear is, you're not good enough, or you're always the problem. Instead of taking it personally, I think this is the most important one, so I'll start again. So now that I've said this is the most important one, instead of taking it personally, remember there is a need behind the behavior. Now that is a tricky one to navigate because you're wondering, okay, so this child is on the floor, they're thrashing around and they're screaming at you, I hate you, I don't, get away from me. And you're like, what is the need behind that behavior? And often that's a difficult time to start assessing needs. That's why in the last video I talked about tracking your children's triggers. Maybe your child waits and doesn't eat or drink anything because they don't recognize their body's signals for hunger. Or maybe they get in an overstimulating environment and there's too much noise and too much light and too much sound. And then they come home and they can't regulate at all. And that's why it's important to do that pre-work and to find out what your kiddos' triggers are, to lessen the frequency and the severity of the meltdowns instead of waiting for the meltdown. So it's almost like you have to be a detective and find out beforehand what's triggering them. Often what we do, guilty here too, is when the child is in severe meltdown mode, we're like, what's going on? What do you need? What does he need? And we just want them to behave and regulate. And that's not the time to do that. And sometimes we just have to wait that out. And then the next time, pay attention to what's happening beforehand so that we can track those triggers and find out what that need is behind the behavior. And I know that it takes work. It really does. It takes a lot of your time to invest in tracking your child's triggers. But if you don't do that, then you're going to be in the same place a year from now. You're going to be dealing with the same behaviors and going, I really don't know what's going on. And some of the behaviors can be they just need that co-regulator beside them, or they need noise reducing headphones, or they need a weighted blanket, or if you're at a party that's too loud and overstimulating, you just need to leave. And that's not a negative thing. That's a positive thing for the child. You're valuing their need and you're meeting them where they are, and that you're helping them regulate by teaching them coping mechanisms and teaching them that it doesn't matter whether people are going to judge you for leaving the party early or not going to the party in the first place or not attending certain events because they trigger you too much right now. So those sorts of things. So I'm going to finish up for today, and thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye.